Hey everyone, welcome back to the deep dive. We all want to learn more, right? But not drown in a sea of information. We're about getting to the core of complex topics, really understanding them.
Absolutely. And today's deep dive, well, we're taking on the thought of a philosopher, maybe one you haven't heard of before, but trust me, he's worth it. Nishitani Keiji.
Keiji, yeah. And to help us navigate this, we've got Hasishuta's analysis of Nishitani's essay, Emptiness and Immediacy.
This essay is key, really, especially for seeing how Nishitani's thinking evolved. In his earlier work, he was focused on emptiness in relation to overcoming, well, nihilism.
Nihilism, heavy stuff.
It is, but in emptiness and immediacy, we see this real shift. Emptiness becomes something more grounded in human experience. It's about sentiment, imagination.
So we're tracing that evolution from this kind of grand, abstract concept of emptiness to something that resonates with how we actually live and feel in the world. Sound good?
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, so starting point. Nishitani's earlier work. We're talking about his book, Religion and Nothingness, right? This is where he's tackling nihilism head-on. And as Hasishito points out, Nishitani saw nihilism as this specifically modern problem.
It's not just the ancient Greek kind, no. This is nihilism, born out of the decline of traditional religion.
It's like the systems of belief that used to give people meaning, they've crumbled. And what's left is this, well, this gaping hole, this sense that nothing really matters.
Exactly. And Nishitani was very concerned about this. Nihilism to him was like this, almost this self-enclosed system, a force of negation so strong that traditional philosophy, religion, they just weren't equipped to counter it.
Interesting. So almost like a virus then. It infects everything, leaving nothing untouched.
A powerful analogy. Because even the search for meaning itself, the desire for salvation, those get undermined by nihilism.
Right. It's bleak.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And for Nishitani, the only way to break through this this all-encompassing negativity was, well, emptiness.
Emptiness, so fighting fire with fire, almost.
You could say that. But it's not just any emptiness. Hasishito makes it very clear. We're talking about a radical emptiness, an absolute negation, going beyond even what nihilism itself can negate.
Whoa. It's like if nihilism says nothing matters, emptiness is saying, what? Nothing to matter.
It's hard to put into words, isn't it? But that's the point. Nishitani believed that only this kind of absolute void could break through nihilism from the inside.
Okay, I'm trying to wrap my head around this. It's like you need something even more fundamental, more powerful than the negativity itself to dismantle it.
Right. You need to go to the very root. And the metaphor Nishitani uses for this is emptiness as the empty sky.
Ah, the empty sky. Okay, so something vast, boundless.
Transcending our limited everyday world, our human-centered perspective. And here's the paradox. This emptiness, this absolute negation, offers no ground to cling to, no easy answers. But in that very lack, there's a potential for liberation.
That's fascinating. So by encountering this complete void, we're forced to let go of everything.
In a sense, yes. We let go of our attachments, our fixed ideas, even our sense of self. The ego, that very thing that fuels nihilistic despair, it can dissolve in the face of this radical emptiness.
There's a Zen saying Nishitani uses that Hasishiro mentions, something about going a step beyond 100 feet or the tip of an oar. I love that image, like pushing past the very furthest limit you can imagine.
It's about reaching a point where there's literally nothing left to hold on to. And in that space, that's where true freedom can emerge.
Okay, so this is Nishitani in his, what they call his middle period, right? Emptiness as this force that can dismantle nihilism. But then things change. His thinking evolves, especially in the essay Emptiness and Immediacy, which Hasishiro spends a lot of time unpacking.
This is where we see a significant shift. The empty sky of his earlier work, it starts to come down to earth, you could say.
More human-centered.
Yes. Nishitani's focus turns to what he calls emptiness in sentiment.
Okay, so not just an abstract concept anymore, but something tied to our actual feelings, emotions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He brings in these two key terms,
Yeah.
juchi and kuchioku. Hasishito translates juchi as sentiment, but it's more than just a passing feeling. It's a deep, profound emotional state. And this is interwoven with kuchioku, the power of imagination.
Emptiness in sentiment. It's an interesting phrase. It suggests that emptiness isn't just an absence, but something that can actually give our emotions a certain quality.
Hasishito uses the words rich tone and fragrance to describe this. It's like emptiness infuses our feelings with depth, with meaning.
It's interesting because earlier we were talking about emptiness as this kind of stark, absolute negation, but now it seems to be something that can actually enrich our experience.
That's the beauty of Nishitani's later thought. He's not rejecting his earlier work, but rather deepening and expanding it. This idea of emptiness and sentiment is all about how emptiness manifests in our human world, in our very being.
And he has this really striking concept for this, the imaging of emptiness. That's ko ni okeru imajika in Japanese.
Right. It's the idea that emptiness, this fundamental reality, is reflected or imaged in our sentiment, in our imagination.
So through our feelings and through our creative faculties, we can actually perceive and understand emptiness.
Yes, and this is where that really powerful image of the sky comes back in. Shutuk emphasizes this point. The physical sky we look up at, it's not just a metaphor for emptiness. Nishitani is saying it is the image of emptiness.
Wow. Okay, so the vastness, the limitlessness, the eternity of the sky, that's emptiness made visible, made perceptible.
Precisely. And Nishitani takes this idea of imaging even further. He applies it to other concepts like Buddha nature and Buddhism, or the Son of God in Christianity. He's suggesting that these are also ways that the transcendent, the ultimate reality, can be grasped through things we can actually experience in the world.
That's really interesting. So these images become a kind of bridge between our limited human perspective and something much larger, much deeper.
Yes. And through these images, through this direct encounter with emptiness, we can experience what Nishitani calls immediacy or soku. It's this unfiltered, direct experience of reality where paradox and absurdity become, well, immediate, right there in front of you.
Okay. Now, Haseshitu brings up another key concept in Nishitani's later work that's closely related to this, making things transparent. That's yunotumeka in Japanese. How does this fit in with the imaging of emptiness?
They work together, really, though Nishitani himself didn't always draw a hard line between them. But one way to understand making things transparent is through his metaphor of the two rooms in a single board wall.
2 rooms and a board wall. Okay, I'm intrigued.
So picture this. 2 rooms, A and B, separated by a wall. Now, room A is somehow indicated as being a part of room B through that wall. They're distinct, but there's a relationship, a connection.
Okay, so maybe there's a doorway or...
Not quite. It's more subtle than that. The point is, this metaphor helps us grasp how seemingly separate individual things can still be related, even while maintaining their distinctness. And that distinctness, that individuality, is what Nishitani calls self-enclosure.
Right, and Haseshitu uses that term non-circumsessional fu-ego to describe this. Each thing exists in its own space, right? They're not completely overlapping.
Exactly. They're not merging or dissolving into each other. But making things transparent is about entering a circumsessional relationship, a relationship of mutual indwelling, you could say, without actually breaking down that wall of individuality. It's like the wall itself becomes transparent, allowing you to see through it, to understand the connection without losing the distinctness of each room.
Ah, so you can perceive the relationship, the connection, without everything becoming one big blur.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And this ties in with what Haseshitu calls knowing that is immediately associated with things. It's about understanding something from the inside, not just observing it from the outside. Does this remind you of anyone?
It's very reminiscent of Nishida Kitaro, Nishitani's teacher.
Spot on. With his ideas of direct experience, pure experience, knowing something without the filters of our conceptual mind.
So it's like instead of just looking at an apple, you're experiencing the appleness of the apple from within the apple itself.
That's a great way to put it. It's that direct, immediate knowledge. Think about feeling pain. You don't stand outside of it and analyze it intellectually. You feel it directly. That's the kind of knowing Nishitani is talking about.
Okay, so how does this making things transparent actually work?
Well, Nishitani says the key is the image. He takes us back to our most fundamental way of knowing sensation.
Our senses, the 5 senses. Sight, sound, smell, taste, touch.
Exactly. He mentions the saying, coolness and warmth are known naturally, right in Jichi. It's pointing to this inherent knowledge that's present in the very act of sensing.
So when I see a tree, I'm not just registering light waves hitting my retina. There's something more going on.
There is. And that something more is the image. Nishitani describes it as a kind of inherent knowledge that's present within all things, like a seed or a nascent form waiting to unfold.
And through our senses, these images within things become active in our awareness, allowing us to know the thing from within.
Yes, it's as if the thing itself is revealing something essential about itself to us through our sensory experience.
It's not just passive perception, then it's more like a dialogue, an exchange.
A beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
And Haseshitu gives this great example from Nishitani. Hearing a cicada, we don't just hear the sound waves, we also perceive the image of the cicada.
The image, so not just the sound, but something more.
Right. And this image, this inherent knowledge of the cicada, possesses what Hatsushutu calls an unqualified universality that goes beyond that specific auditory experience. He even identifies it as a kind of awareness or logos that's inseparable from the cicada itself.
Okay, so it's like there's this inherent intelligence, this meaning embedded within the cicada, within all things.
Exactly. And this making things transparent, this knowing from within, it doesn't stop at our basic senses. Hatsushutu explains that it extends to all levels of human understanding.
So from a simple act of seeing a tree to what? The highest levels of philosophical or religious insight?
Precisely. It culminates in what Buddhists call shugaku, the awakening of Shakyamuni, the Buddha's enlightenment. It's like there's this fundamental awareness, this knowledge which brings things to light that permeates all of reality.
So the Buddha's awakening, or any profound insight we might have, it's not something that comes from outside of us. It's more like we're tapping into this deeper level of knowing that's always already present.
Exactly. And Hatsushutu connects this to the activation of our kushioku, our imagination. He points out that those aha moments of realization, those deep insights, they arise from the core of our being, connected to our physical body and senses when that inherent image unfolds. And in profound religious experiences is what he calls elemental imagination that wells up from the depths of reality.
Elemental imagination. I like that. It suggests something primal, something fundamental. And Nishitani actually calls the image the path to concrete things. That's Jibutsu and Utsuro in Japanese.
He's emphasizing that the image allows us to experience things in their concreteness from the inside, beyond just their external appearance or our intellectual understanding of them.
So it's not just about abstract concepts. It's about experiencing the world in its fullness, its richness.
Precisely. And he describes this process as a transformation from the thing itself to its image, where the inner essence of the thing reveals its form to us. He even connects the unifying power of our senses, the sensus communis, to the workings of imagination.
That's fascinating. It's like our senses aren't just separate channels of information, but they're working together, guided by imagination, to reveal this deeper reality.
Exactly. And this brings us back to nihilism. Remember how we talk about the brute facticity of things, their seemingly isolated, independent existence?
Right, that self-enclosed quality.
Well, Hatsushutu points out that this brute facticity mirrors the self-enclosure of nihilism and emptiness. By transforming into image, it breaks through this isolation, this self-enclosure from within.
So emptiness becomes the key to overcoming the very problem it initially seemed to embody.
You could say that. And in his later thought, Nishitani goes so far as to consider emptiness itself to be a kind of brute fact, a fundamental, irreducible reality.
Okay, that's a lot to unpack, but what strikes me is how Nishitani is really trying to move beyond traditional Western philosophy here.
He is. Hatsushutu emphasizes how Nishitani saw the limits of that traditional subject-object framework, what philosophers call noesis noesis. He wanted to point to a different kind of knowing, a knowing that is one with things, mano to itosu no chi, that we find in religious experience and artistic creation. He even uses terms like pre-philosophic or post-philosophic to describe this.
So a way of knowing that goes beyond the usual categories of thought, beyond separating ourselves from the world.
Exactly. And it's remarkable how Nishitani uses this theory of the image to actually re-examine the philosophy of his own teacher, Nishida.
Nishida, with his focus on direct experience, that state before the distinction between subject and object arises.
The same. But Nishitani felt that Nishida's insights needed the concept of making things transparent to be fully expressed.
So it's like he's building on Nishida's foundation, but adding another layer, another dimension.
Precisely. And remember, Nishida's ideal knower, the one having this direct experience, is fundamentally one who knows by becoming one with things, illuminating them from their very core.
It's like that idea of experiencing the appleness of the apple from within the apple itself, but taken to a whole other level.
Exactly. And Hatsushutu reminds us that Nishitani's fascination with the image and imagination, this wasn't something that just popped up in his later work. It was there all along, even evident in his early writings on Aristotle.
So it's like a thread running through his entire philosophical journey.
A thread that becomes increasingly prominent and ultimately leads to this really profound shift in his understanding of emptiness.
Okay, so just to recap, we've seen this incredible evolution in Nishitani's thought, right? Emptiness goes from being this transcendent, empty sky that can overcome nihilism to a much more integrated aspect of human experience. In his later work, it's reflected in our deepest feelings, our jushi, We experience it through this imaging of emptiness and through the process of making things transparent, allowing us to know the world from within, beyond just surface appearances or intellectual understanding.
And I think what makes Nishitani so compelling, so relevant to all of us, is how he bridges the gap between these big philosophical ideas and our everyday lives. Hase is really good at bringing this out. He reminds us that experiencing the atmosphere of a landscape or feeling a sense of inner peace, these aren't just random occurrences. They are, for Nishitani, tangible reflections of this deeper reality of emptiness, made accessible to us through the image and our own capacity for sentiment.
It's amazing, isn't it? How something as vast and seemingly abstract as emptiness can be experienced in such concrete personal ways. And I think grasping this perspective, the way Hashoshju's analysis helps us do, is incredibly valuable. It gives us a new way of understanding the nature of reality, how we come to know it.
It's a way of knowing that goes beyond just information, beyond simply accumulating facts. It's about a deeper understanding, a more profound engagement with the world. And that's what this deep dive is all about.
Absolutely. And it leaves us with a really big question to ponder. How might this understanding of emptiness and sentiment and making things transparent actually change the way you perceive your own emotions, your connection to the world around you?
It's an invitation to look deeper, to explore your own experience with fresh eyes, and maybe, just maybe, discover a richer, more interconnected reality than you ever imagined.
I love that. A perfect place to leave it. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll see you next time.